The original idea I had was, and this I think was 1980, but it was based on the notion that every 1,000 years there are huge disturbances in the social and political universe as we know it. If you go back to the time of Christ, that was a huge disturbance. Back 1,000 years beyond that to the fall of the Hittite Empire and everything that flowed from that. And more recently in our time, where Islam and Christianity were in conflict, and the Dark Ages and the Vikings and all that time of turmoil and stress. So it seemed to have a very respectable precedent. And so all of these stories need something solid to hook into, and that was the hook for The Keeper of Traken.
Impressed with Burns' ideas, Bidmead commissioned the full script, and Byrne began to develop his story further.
At the heart of this ancient civilization, which had worked out a way in which they could remain in harmonious union, as I don't know whether it was Chris Bidmead's line or my own, but he says 1,000 years of...
people just being terribly nice to each other.
And it's true, they were very nice to each other, except that the end of the 1,000 years, they started being not so nice to each other.
Byrne's original concept featured at its centre a villain called Mogan, and the Traken people were divided into two factions.
When I first submitted the idea, it had something that was more like the Japanese shogunate, rather than the Shakespearean type model that we later developed. And it had two contending groups.
The two groups were the scientific Greys and the spiritual Blacks, with the Keeper in overall control.
While the position of Keeper was one that controlled a great deal of power, it was one where the ego itself had to be buried in order for it to be successful, and therefore the choice of who was going to be Keeper was crucial, and only the very best would be elevated to this. If issues of personal ambition and power-seeking ever crept into the equation, the results would be catastrophic. And of course, it so happened, purely by accident, that these elements of personal ambition and things became mixed up in the transition from one Keeper to the next in my story.